Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a hidden injury that thousands of serving and retired Scottish police officers carry home with them every single day. Look, it's completely invisible, it doesn't show up on an MRI, and it leaves literally zero physical marks. But the impact? Yeah, that is undeniable. We're going to uncover the modern legal reality behind your tinnitus and, spoiler alert, why what you've likely been told about it for years might actually be completely wrong. So let's just get right into it. Listen to how one officer described this condition. It is loudest in the quiet moments the job never allowed. The bedroom at 2 in the morning, the armchair after retirement. Man, that just perfectly captures how this injury invades the quietest parts of your life, doesn't it? It wears down your patience, erodes your concentration, and completely wrecks your sleep, night after night. And in its severe forms, it carries a very real and honestly often ignored psychological toll. But what's actually happening in those quiet moments? Well, medically speaking, tinnitus is the perception of sound, that ringing, buzzing, hissing, or whistling, without any external source at all. But here is the absolutely crucial part. It's caused by permanent, non-regenerative damage to the super delicate hair cells of the cochlea right inside your inner ear. Meaning, tinnitus isn't just some annoyance or a trick your mind is playing on you. It is a permanent, physical, occupational injury. Your brain is generating those signals precisely because those delicate sensory structures were degraded by noise. And there's a really cruel trick to this condition, and it basically plays out over the entire course of a career. Think about your years on active duty. You're constantly surrounded by radios, traffic noise, sirens, just the general 24/7 clamor of the station. All that background chaos actually acts like a blanket, masking the damage. But then you retire. The sudden quiet of civilian living strips that blanket away and completely unmasks the ringing. It makes so many officers mistakenly think the ringing only started after they retired. But in reality, the damage was done during your service. The quiet just finally revealed it. So what's causing this degradation in the first place? Well, it's the highly unique acoustic environment of a 25 to 30-year police career. We're talking about the extreme, sudden impulse noise of firearms training, sirens blaring at close range for response officers, the sustained roar of motorcycle wind, public order crowds with distraction devices going off, and even the heavy acoustic load of custody suites. Now, on their own, on any given Tuesday, you might just brush these off as part of the job. But cumulatively, over decades, they add up to a massive, heavily damaging noise dose. And beyond that daily grind, there's this uniquely police-flavored hazard known as acoustic shock. This is a sudden, totally unexpected spike of noise. Think of a transmission surge, severe feedback, or a loud shriek on the line that gets delivered directly into your ear through your radio earpiece or headset. Because the source of that noise is literally sitting inside your ear canal, it completely bypasses your body's natural defenses. And remember, the police service issued you this equipment, which means they bore the absolute responsibility for protecting you from it. Now, this brings us to what is probably a massive misconception, and honestly, the biggest hurdle for a lot of folks. What happens if your hearing test comes back completely normal? For years, officers who complained of this ringing were sent off for a standard audiogram, and when the results came back broadly within normal limits, they were told, often by occupational health or well-meaning doctors, that hey, without measurable hearing loss, there's absolutely nothing you can claim for. Case closed, right? Wrong. The truth is that old advice absolutely does not survive contact with modern law. Today, tinnitus is a recognized, fully compensable occupational injury in its own right. It does not, let me repeat that, it does not require measurable hearing loss to be a valid claim. Your standard hearing thresholds might look perfectly fine on paper, but that subtle cochlear damage causing the ringing, that is still very, very real. If the ringing is real and the noise exposure was from the job, a normal hearing test is definitely not a closed door. Need proof of exactly how the courts view this nowadays? Try £19,000. That is the exact figure the High Court awarded for tinnitus alone in the April 2026 Abbott versus Ministry of Defense test cases. Get this, in one of the lead cases, the claimant actually failed to prove their hearing loss was caused by service noise, but they succeeded on their tinnitus claim and walked away with this substantial sum. That legal precedent is huge. It powerfully shapes the landscape for every single occupational tinnitus claim in Britain right now. So, what's the legal foundation for all of this? It rests entirely on the service's failure to protect you from foreseeable harm. Under the Noise at Work regulations from back in 1989 and updated in 2005, there are strict, legally binding limits. The lower action values kick in at 80 decibels, the upper at 85, with an absolute hard limit of 87 decibels. The law actually mandates rigorous risk assessments and health surveillance. meaning exposing officers to hazardous noise without properly specified and enforced protection is a crystal clear breach of their legal duty. Now, I know what a lot of you might be thinking right about now, but hey, my exposure happened way before 2013, back when we had regional forces. Well, here is the legal reality. Police Scotland holds full liability for legacy forces pre-2013. If your hearing was damaged while serving in Strathclyde, Lothian and Borders, or literally any other regional force, the National Service fully took on that responsibility as the successor organization. That 2013 merger, it simply changed the name on the legal letter. It absolutely did not erase the liability.
And there's another sneaky technicality that has historically deterred a lot of officers: the office of constable. It's a known fact that police officers hold the office of constable rather than working under a standard, ordinary contract of employment. But let's be completely clear here. Holding this office does not block occupational injury claims. The employer's duty to take reasonable care for your health and safety still rigorously applies. The whole office of constable thing is merely a drafting technicality for your solicitor to sort out. It absolutely does not stop your claim.
Okay, so let's see how this all builds into Scottish limitation law. Generally speaking, you have 3 years to make a personal injury claim. But hold on, the clock might not start when you think it does. First, you've got years of active service masking the noise. Then retirement unmasks the ringing. But in Scotland, your 3-year limitation clock often doesn't start ticking until your date of knowledge. That's the exact day a clinician formally and finally links your ringing to your police job. So even if the exposure happened decades ago, your legal clock might have literally only just started.
So how do we actually go about proving an invisible injury? Well, it requires specific, highly structured evidence. You're going to need a detailed service history, noting your postings, any firearms work, and specific acoustic incidents. Medically, it requires a specialized ear, nose, and throat expert assessment. And to measure the unmeasurable, specialists use structured instruments, like the Tinnitus Handicap Inventory, to objectively grade exactly how the ringing disrupts your mood and your daily life. In severe cases, they'll even bring in psychological reports to document the resulting anxiety or sleep disorders. Now, despite how complex that might sound, the path to compensation is actually pretty straightforward. It's typically handled entirely on a no-win, no-fee basis by specialists, which means it is completely free of upfront costs to you. It all starts with an initial consultation to gather your detailed history. Then they recover your medical records to secure that crucial expert assessment we just talked about. From there, a formal letter of claim is submitted to Police Scotland, which leads into negotiation and, if absolutely necessary, court proceedings to secure your settlement. Let's talk numbers and what this means practically for you. Based on the Judicial College guidelines, for mild to moderate tinnitus, compensation generally sits somewhere between £7,000 and £15,000. For severe, constant, sleep-disrupting tinnitus, that jumps to between £15,000 and £28,000. And if it happens to be accompanied by measurable hearing loss, those combined awards can skyrocket to up to £80,000 or more. Crucially, this doesn't even include special damages, which can cover a lifetime of super expensive sound therapy devices and tinnitus-masking hearing aids. So I want to leave you with this thought. If the ringing never stops, why assume the law won't listen? For far too long, officers have been dismissed and just told to live with it. But finding out if you have a valid legal claim costs absolutely nothing. So the real question is, will you let a permanent, entirely preventable harm remain the quietest, most painful secret of your service? Or will you take action to get the recognition and support you actually deserve? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this brought you some much-needed clarity.